The political orientation of the Migrante organization, from the Secretariat of Migrante Europe. Migrante International is a global alliance of progressive organizations of Filipino migrants and their families, founded to fight for their rights and well-being. It was established in response to the widespread problem of forced migration and exploitation, caused by the lack of real economic and social reform in the Philippines. The organization promotes national democracy and joins the fight of the Filipino people for a just and prosperous society. Within its global scope, Migrante Europe was formed, a regional organization focused on the care and defense of Filipino migrants in Europe. It acts as a central hub connecting various chapter organizations in countries and cities across the region. Each chapter organization promotes local action and collaborates with Filipino migrants to address issues of labor exploitation, human trafficking, discrimination, and other challenges in their host countries. Migrante is more than just an organization, it is militant, it is a movement. Their goals are to promote the well-being of Filipino migrants, fight against abusive policies of the government and foreign powers, and contribute to the national democratic movement of the Filipino people. It participates in the broader fight against imperialism, bureaucratic capitalism, and feudalism, the three roots of societal problems, while also emphasizing the fight against fascism and neoliberalism, which lead to more intense exploitation. Fascism appears in the form of repression of the democratic rights of the people, especially of migrants and activists, while neoliberalism continues the policy of commercialization of public services, deregulation, and privatization, which further impoverishes workers and migrants. Both fascism and neoliberalism serve as instruments to maintain the structures of imperialism, bureaucratic capitalism, and feudalism. Having global, regional, and local structures shows the need to organize Filipino migrants at different levels. On a global scale, Migrante International leads in setting the direction and overall campaigns. At the regional level, like Migrante Europe, it strengthens action on region-specific issues. At the local level, chapter organizations provide support, education, and campaigns to ensure that Filipino migrants have a voice and power against exploitation and abuse. Our principles. First, national freedom. Migration is a sign of the lack of national freedom. Instead of building its own economic strength, the government continues to rely on money sent home by overseas workers. This situation keeps the Philippines as a source of cheap labor for powerful economies. True freedom can only be achieved with an independent economic policy focused on building up industries and real land reform. Second, migrant rights and welfare. Around the world, Filipino migrants are often victims of discrimination, abuse, and a lack of protection. The government must ensure their rights, including fair wages, safe workplaces, and protection against illegal recruitment, human trafficking, and other forms of exploitation. This includes the need for better services from embassies and consulates, which are often insufficient or slow to respond to their needs. Third, national democracy. The struggle of migrants is part of a larger fight for national democracy. Stopping forced migration requires deep changes in the country's social system, including breaking up land monopolies, promoting national industrialization, and establishing a truly democratic government. A democratic society provides more equal opportunities for everyone, not just a privileged few. The situation of Filipino migrants. The history of Filipino migration shows the continuous exploitation of our fellow countrymen's labor. From forced labor during the Spanish colonial era to the neoliberal labor export program from the Marcos Sr. dictatorship up to the current regime, migrants remain vulnerable to various forms of abuse and exploitation. Here are the main issues. First, unfair wages. Many Filipinos abroad work for low wages that don't match the difficulty of their jobs. Despite their skills and hard work, they often receive lower wages than workers in the host country. For example, domestic workers are often paid less than the host country's minimum wage, even if they work overtime. Second, discrimination and abuse. Filipino migrants, especially domestic workers and factory workers, often experience discrimination from their employers or in the host country. This includes racial discrimination, sexism, and xenophobia. Physical and sexual abuse are commonly experienced by domestic workers in countries like the Middle East, where their legal protection is limited. Despite severe cases of abuse, many migrants are afraid to report it because of the threat of deportation or lack of support from embassies. Third, human trafficking. Many Filipinos are victims of illegal recruiters who lure them with false promises of high wages and good working conditions. Trafficking victims often end up in forced labor, prostitution, or modern forms of slavery. Most cases are linked to the lack of regulation of recruitment agencies, as well as the government's inaction in addressing this issue. Fourth, lack of protection. The government's action in responding to the needs of Filipinos abroad is weak, especially in areas affected by war or crisis like the Middle East and Gaza. Embassies and consulates often lack sufficient staff, funds, and programs to support workers in emergency situations. Many migrant workers experience slow repatriation and legal assistance processes. For example, the case of stranded workers in Kuwait and other countries showed the lack of a quick and comprehensive response from the government. Fifth, excessive fees. Filipino migrants are often victims of fees imposed by their own governments such as OWWA fees, PhilHealth and SSS contributions, and other mandatory fees. These excessive fees add to their financial burden even before they leave the country. Once in the host country, they are also affected by high remittance fees that reduce the money they can send to their families. Sixth, government abandonment. Despite being called new heroes, there's a clear lack of adequate programs for their reintegration into the country after their contracts end. Often returning workers have no decent job or livelihood opportunities, forcing them to work abroad again. Reintegration program services are not only lacking but also limited to vocational training that doesn't meet the workers' real needs. Seventh, effects of neoliberalism. The continued implementation of the labor export program shows the government's response to unemployment through a short-term solution, sending workers abroad. Instead of building industries that provide decent jobs within the country, neoliberal policies are favored, including deregulation, privatization, and importing cheap products from other countries. Our goals. Stop forced migration. The solution to forced migration is not creating more labor export agreements, but building opportunities at home. We need real land reform to give farmers a decent living and national industrialization to create jobs for workers, protect our migrant workers, ensure swift action on cases of abuse and human trafficking, launch a comprehensive program to regularly monitor the conditions of Filipinos overseas, including having more welfare officers and legal advisors in every embassy, migrant workers' solidarity, strengthen organizations that defend the rights of migrants and their families, promote broader alliances for collective action against anti-migrant policies and neoliberal government programs, fight imperialism. Push for reforms in the global economic system that keeps countries like the Philippines as exporters of cheap labor. Unite with global movements against imperialism and neoliberalism. Our tasks. Organizing. Launch campaigns to build stronger relationships with countries that have a large population of Filipino migrants. Make sure that each community has clear goals and plans to maintain unity. Campaigns and propaganda. Use modern and creative ways to spread the message of fighting for the rights of migrants, such as social media, infographics, and videos. Promote awareness about the root causes of migration and its connection to the national situation. Education. Conduct training and seminars that focus on strengthening the skills of leaders and members. Make sure that everyone understands their role in the broader movement for change. Solidarity. Connect with progressive organizations in other countries to promote global unity against imperialism and neoliberal programs. Conclusion. The fight of Filipino migrants is not just about the rights and welfare of workers overseas, but it's part of a broader movement for a just, free, and democratic society. Forced migration is a manifestation of bigger problems in our country: imperialism, bureaucratic capitalism, feudalism, fascism, and neoliberalism. As long as these systems remain, our countrymen will continue to leave to seek a better life in other countries, even at the cost of their freedom, dignity, and security. Despite the challenges, migrants are not just victims, but active advocates for change. Their unity and collective action become powerful instruments to fight for their rights, oppose anti-migrant policies, and contribute to the national democratic movement. With every protest in front of embassies, with every campaign for repatriation, and with every action for fair wages, migrants inspire the Filipino people that the fight for rights is also a fight for the country. Organizing Filipino migrants at the global, regional, and local levels is an important step in strengthening the movement for change. Migrante International, Migrante Europe, and various chapter organizations serve as pillars of the migrants' fight, not only for the welfare of each worker, but for the building of a more humane society. The success of this fight requires broader support from all sectors of society: farmers, workers, youth, women, and the church. With the unity of Filipinos in every corner of the world, a society that truly serves the interests of the Filipino people can be established. A nation with dignity, justice, and prosperity for all. In the end, the struggle of migrants is a fight for dignity, rights, and the future. A fight whose victory is not only for them but for the entire nation. Abante Migrante, Palaban, Militante.